Welcome to episode 294. On this week's episode, I chat with Riot Games LCS Commissioner Chris Greeley about League of Legends esports in North America and the new LCO launching on Feb 23.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who's cheering on Gravitas in the LCO, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, I am looking forward to hearing people cheer on Gravitas in the LCO. My name is Sean Callanan. I am the host of Sports Geek. You can find me on most social media platforms by looking up at Sean Callanan or at Sports Geek. This episode, we're going to talk a little bit of League of Legends esports. If you don't know, if this is the first time you've listened to the podcast, welcome. I also own an esports team, Gravitas, that has been playing in the Oceanic Pro League, that has been relaunched, rebranded, and starts Feb 23 under the moniker of the LCO, League of Legends Circuit Oceania. The LCO kicks off Feb 23, so it was great to catch up with the LCS Commissioner, which is the North American League for League of Legends esports, Chris Greeley. We worked with Chris in helping form and get the new league up and running, so really great to discuss all things esports with him. I will talk more about the plans for Gravitas and announce our 2021 lineup after my chat with Chris. Before I do, don't forget, as always, if you need help in driving more digital revenue for your sports team, brand, league, please get in touch. That's what we do at Sports Geek, whether it's running our digital to dollars process, helping you with content, helping you with pitches, helping you with sponsor workshop, membership campaigns, ticketing, hopefully when we start selling more tickets in 2021. So please reach out. You can always go to sportsgeekhq.com to find all resources you need, whether it's this podcast, Sports Geek News, email newsletter, joining us on the Zoom calls, or everything can be found there. And you can always find a link to reach out or send me an email, send me a DM, get in touch. I love working with podcast listeners. Before I jump into the chat with Chris Greeley from the LCS, just a quick shout out to my Patreon subscribers and supporters. You can become a supporter of our Patreon campaign by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon to help support all the sports business content that we produce for the sports business industry that we think will bounce back in 2021. So it helps pay for the costs of editing the podcast, producing the sports biz Zoom calls, and creating the newsletter. And I really do appreciate it. There's multiple levels available there. You can now do it on a yearly basis. So please check it out, sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Now here is my chat with the LCS Commissioner, Chris Greeley. Very happy to welcome the Commissioner of the LCS and Director of Esports at Riot Games, Chris Greeley. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No problems. Normally, I ask people how they got their start in the world of sports, but for you, I want to ask is how does a lawyer end up running an esports league? What was your entry into the world of esports?
Yeah, I was a lawyer in New York for 12, 13 years. We had a sports law group at my law firm that I had been evangelizing esports to for a while. We had a client of the law firm who was building an arena in the U.S., was looking for some esports advice, sat in my office one day for 2 hours kind of pumping me for information. And I later found out he was applying for a job at Riot. He got to the end of that process, decided that video games were not the right path for him, and sent Riot my way for the job. So I was a long time gamer. Started on an Atari 2600, not to date myself, and kind of played all the way through. I would leave my law firm at 8:30, pick up dinner on the way home, plop down in front of my computer and run WoW raids. And then when my buddies got tired of WoW, they all moved to League of Legends, and I went with them, back in 2012. And that was my introduction to League. And I started watching the LCS, and although I don't like to admit it, the EU LCS as well, and kind of followed those professional leagues. So when Riot called and wanted to talk to me about coming on to, at the time, lead league operations in North America and help them build out the North American franchising process, it was something that was too good to give up and too good to pass on.
Yeah, so I mean, that was a really interesting time. So it was 2017, and Riot was looking to change the league a little bit. And so, do you want to sort of explain like what the league and LCS looked like when you arrived, and some of the process and the change that went through those first couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2016, before I got there, they had a promotion relegation system in North America. So the LCS, the top layer of competition, was 10 teams. And then, as you'd see in like the EPL, the bottom 2 teams in any split would play the top 2 teams from the tier below, which was called Challenger. There's a lot of discussion from the then LCS owners about the economic model and, wanting to work more closely together with each other and with Riot, and finding some permanence and some revenue share, and kind of building something that looked more like conventional sports in North America. So we spent 2017, at least the first half of 2017, figuring out what the governance structure looked like and the finance structure. Spent a lot of time talking to teams and experts, and put together our franchising plan, which we announced sometime in May or June of 2017, and then spent the rest of the year running an application process and picking the 10 teams that kicked off the franchised LCS at the beginning of 2018.
And so that brought in a couple of new teams, like the Golden State Warriors, which became the Golden Guardians, and also solidified, OGs, teams that have been there from the beginning. So how is that? I guess that relationship now working with the franchise owners, and like what's your goal as the commissioner, sort of juggling the needs of the league, the needs of the team, and then the overall scene?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, because in most conventional sports or franchise sports, the teams own the league as a collective. So when you look at the NBA in the U.S., Adam Silver works for the teams, right? They pay his salary and pull all that money up. Esports is distinct because we have a 3-party system. So we've got the game publisher, the team owners, and the pro players. So I work for Riot Games and try to balance the needs of the team owners and their long-term desires to increase asset valuation in the slots that they hold, increase revenue of the league. And then on the Riot side, right, I'm focused on our goals around esports to run a profitable business, go out and make sure that we're evangelizing the things that we do into the mainstream to make sure people understand, that it's a sport, that we have large audiences, that we have large digital audiences, that, the LCS in North America, we're the number 3 professional sport in viewership for the 18 to 34-year-old demographic behind the NFL and NBA. Like, we want to go out and talk to folks about that. And for people who don't know League of Legends, who don't watch esports, we want to be able to bring them into the fold. So to a large extent, my goals in running the LCS and my owner's goals, I think, overlap. We're all pushing to have a bigger audience, make more money, provide the most compelling product for fans that we can. And then, there's the part of me that worries about the Riot pieces, right? I want more people playing and downloading League of Legends, but ultimately, my goal is to make sure that we're pushing the esport first, and that's where our focus is.
And it is, especially, you've got a lot of the ownership groups that are in the franchise system are coming from traditional sports, and so they're bringing that expertise. But a lot of the conversation when you're in esports is explaining esports and explaining Legends to mainstream. And you would have had those discussions, since 2017 and even before that, like that actually got you the job. How do you think those discussions and conversations are happening in terms of both visibility from a wider market, but then also with brands starting to understand what League of Legends is, getting past that? Is it really a sport? Do people watch it? Well, my goodness, to be able to get to a stat there that, third in 18 to 34, because that's where the base of the market is for esports. How has that conversation shifted over the past, 3 years?
I think we've really pushed past is this a sport conversation,
Yep.
And I think usually what you get from folks is, who cares, right? Whether it's a sport or it's not a sport, it's just not something that's worth arguing about. I think everybody has a different opinion on that. When folks hear the general statistics, right? The amount of viewership we push for Worlds, the amount of viewership we push for our domestic leagues, the arenas we've sold out. When you tell someone we've sold out, Oracle Arena and Madison Square Garden and kind of everything in between, people understand that, right? They understand that fans care, fans show up, fans wake up in the morning, and the first thing they do is check on news from their favorite teams and their favorite leagues, and the same thing when they go to bed at night. The conversation around League of Legends as a game is always a difficult one because it's a really complex game, right? At its heart, it's 2 teams of 5 and you're trying to destroy the other team's base. But, the kind of devil is in the details when you really get down to it. And I joke with folks, when you want to explain Rocket League to people, it's like, well, it's cars and they're playing soccer. It's like, you now know enough to go watch Rocket League, or the 2K League is, video game basketball. It's like, oh, great. Now I know. So for us, when you start talking about, archers shooting frozen arrows at each other across a map to stop a teleport before someone goes back to defend base from the super minions that are flooding through, and like most people turn off. So I found the best way to really explain the esport experience to someone, and it's much harder during COVID, obviously, is to walk them into a live event. Because if you close your eyes, you don't know that you're at an esport event. You could be at a basketball game or a hockey game, right, in the same venue. And then people are interested, right? It gets them past the this is scary because I don't know what it is, and therefore I'm not interested, to this is something I should learn about. And then it's a matter of trying to draw them into those kind of basic levels of storyline and pointing out the basics of the game. It's a really deep game. I've described it as 4D chess for folks, right? There's just so many aspects to it. But I think that's one of the things that hooks fans in, right? There's always something to learn, something to delve into, and something different to master. And I think it's the same reason that, 10 years in, people are still playing League of Legends.
Yep. The analogy as far as difficulty in explaining League of Legends, I use is trying to explain to someone in the US Australian rules football, AFL, right? It's like, here it is. It's called Australian rules, but guess what? There's actually no rules. We'll yell about the rules the whole way through, and this is what we're trying to do. So, but again, it's once you get deeper into it and start understanding some of the tactics, you go, oh, I really understand this game, and I think there is some similarities there. I want to move to and I do agree the events piece, like even going to Melbourne Esports Open here and seeing the actual fans who normally only consume it online via Twitch and YouTube, being part of the experience, not realizing the cheering and the tribal nature is an awesome part of it. Obviously, like every part of the sports world, those events haven't happened due to COVID. What was the experience like last year, and it's continuing to be a process now? How did COVID affect and really transform and change what you were doing in the LCS last year, as far as adapting to keep the broadcast going, but then also making sure you've got a product out there? Yeah.
So the beginning of March last year, COVID was pretty widespread in that point, at least in China, and kind of moving into other parts of the world. And we were looking at it, but we had H1N1, maybe 10 years ago, and it was a thing that a lot of people talked about, but it never impacted daily life, right? Nothing closed. I don't know anyone. I'm sure it was devastating for some folks, but it just didn't have a widespread effect. So there was no level of preparedness that I think any of us had for the devastation that COVID was going to wreak. So I remember at the beginning of March, as we started to talk about where this was going and safety precautions and whether this was going to impact us, someone on the team asked me, would we ever consider playing the LCS remotely? And I laughed and said, basically over my dead body. So 2 weeks later.
So for people who don't know, like the LCS is normally played in a studio, in LA, players on a stage, and they're all there in real life, with fans in the stands, and that's the normal week to week LCS broadcast, pre-COVID.
And it was like really ritualistic for us, right? The idea that we would ever play an LCS game that wasn't, on a local area network with people in person, but not only because it's what we've always done, right? So you stick with that, but because of competitive integrity concerns, right? You can't cheat when I monitor everything, right? You can't move around the building without us there. So 2 weeks later, it's March 13th. It's a Thursday or a Friday. Our Academy League, which is our B League, is getting ready to kick off. And we're sitting in a conference room debating the weekend. And we had gone from, it's going to be just a normal weekend the way it had been the week before, to, all right, we're not going to have any fans. And then it was, all right, we'll also bar the press from the building. And then it came down to, all right, can we really bring pro players in and ask our teammates to come into the building when like a bunch of people could get sick and die, right? It just doesn't feel worthwhile. So we literally had academy players in lobby waiting for the referee to start the game. And we shut everything down. And I remember that morning walking over to the woman who had asked 2 weeks ago if we would ever play remote, and told her, when you have a good option and a bad option, the bad option seems ridiculous. When you have a bad option and a terrible option, the bad option doesn't really seem so bad anymore. But it was really hard. Like for us, like being able to run the show every week is like a huge pride point, right? We have our pro teams and pro players that are counting on us. We have fans, we have our internal teams. Like I remember making the call and then sitting at my desk, just in absolute shell shock that we had to make that call. And we weren't leading the pack, right? The NBA 2 days prior or a day prior had canceled their season and really kind of opened the door for everybody else. But it took us 7 days to get back up and running remotely. Our tech team basically worked nonstop for a week to move all of our normal, we have a big fancy control room in LA that looks like, a more high-tech version of what you'd see for an NFL game, right? As we walk into the Super Bowl, we had to convert all those fun toys into cloud-based technology, which existed, just wasn't configured and wasn't set up for our workflows. So we came back online a week later. We condensed our playoff schedule so that we would finish at the same time. And we ran through and finished our spring split and then started making preparations. And we've been playing remote since, with a very deep desire to get back to the way life was pre-COVID. But, LA is coming off of a recent COVID spike. Vaccines are just starting to roll out. So our hopeful plan is to get our talent back into the building so that we can broadcast games using our facilities and then move to a point where we can safely have pro players back in the building and then eventually get back to having fans. My guess is next year.
I mean, that's the thing. Like the turnaround to do that in a week is, first of all, remarkable, to move everything that was effectively offline and in studio to an online cloud-based environment, because it's not as easy as flicking a switch. Like there's a bit of, you guys are playing online, it's games. It's just stay online. Like not realizing how much physical infrastructure is there, but for esports to keep on rolling on, especially through that. Was there a more attention as you were able to continue with content? I know, my part of the world, we had the Grand Prix cancelled and then AFL and NRL stopped and, Gravitas we missed one broadcast day and then we were playing the next week and everyone's like, I can't watch anything else. Oh, how's Gravitas going? Did you get there? Was there more attention on the LCS because it was such a free zone of sports content?
I think we saw, certainly our viewership was up in summer. I think in spring, everything was in such disarray. And at that point we were just trying to finish a season, right? There was no, there were no marketing efforts going on. It was all hands on deck to make sure that we were, maintaining competitive integrity and running our games. I think once we were able to get our feet under us in May and prepare for the season in June, it was a lot better. But look, we saw additional interest. ESPN called and said, all right, how do we get some of your games on air? Because we all of a sudden have an awful lot of real estate open. So we were across ESPN2 and lost our ESPN slot for our finals match when they decided to move up the Michael Jordan documentary. They moved it up by 4 weeks or 6 weeks and took our slot. And they're like, hey, look, we're just not going to bump the MJ documentary for you, which made sense, I think.
And so then the next challenge is, for those who don't know the Riot ecosystem, the LCS is one of multiple leagues that then funnel into a world championship, which was proposed to be in Shanghai, and then was hosted in Shanghai. What were the logistics behind the scenes to get teams to Shanghai and to run that event from a Riot point of view? Like, again, in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, we had already lost. We have two international competitive tournaments every year.
Yep.
We have the Mid-Season Invitational, which is in May, and that fell right to the wayside in the midst of COVID and was turned into an online streamathon where we raise some money for COVID awareness and to fight the spread of the disease. But yeah, Worlds was a big deal for us. Our global team made the decision pretty early that they just weren't going to cancel it, and that they also weren't going to run it if they couldn't do it safely, but that they weren't going to cancel it. Therefore, like the mandate was figure out how to run this in a way that's safe. So I think the team took some, just as a disclaimer, I didn't work directly on Worlds. Yeah. But that team certainly took some inspiration from what other professional sports leagues were doing. The NBA ran a full bubble in Florida and got their season in. They worked really closely with our team on the ground in China, and had discussions with the local government about how we could get our players into Shanghai and do it in a safe manner and go through their quarantine, their countrywide quarantine protocols. So we sent every player qualified for Worlds to China. They spent 14 days in a hotel room by themselves, isolated from their team with nothing but a computer and some workout equipment in the room. I don't know. Did you, you guys? Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that is, it's prime gamer. Like, I haven't spoken to a gamer that, we went through 100 days of lockdown here in Melbourne, and, all the gamers I speak to, it's like, oh, that's sort of my life. I don't get out too much. If someone says we get out for an hour for exercise, they're like, oh, I have to get out for an hour for exercise. Like, so speaking to the guys at Legacy where they qualified for most, they were there and, they were still playing and scrimming effectively in the rooms. But, big sacrifice by all the players to quarantine in and then play and then in some cases quarantine when they came back. But to pull off the event overall, was remarkable to have the virtual stadium and do all the things with the broadcast to give it to elevate it in the world's feel. Was a pretty remarkable achievement. And, again, touch wood, hopefully things can come up and we can get back to that, that world's experience that we have seen, previously with big crowds and the like. Moving to 2021, the LCS has changed things up a bit around your format for the year. In that you've just finished the LCS lock-in tournament, sort of a pre-season tourney, and you're about to start the spring split. What were some of the reasonings behind, I guess, changing the format up a little bit for the LCS?
Yeah, we launched a rebrand this year for the LCS. Changed the logo, kind of changed the voice of the league. Every year we spend time with our owners right after the season ends to talk about what the format for the next season will look like. So coming into the 2020 season, we had made a bunch of changes to our postseason. We had added not a full losers bracket, but there definitely was a second track to make it to the finals if you had lost. Yeah. And those, it was really well received by fans. So we sat down for 2021 and, I told teams, I don't know that I'm particularly interested in making changes to the offseason other than some quality of life changes around the way we schedule games and which seeds play which and, that kind of stuff. But I said, we're open to talking about the regular season. We've played a 9-week best of one double round robin. So every team's playing 18 games in the spring in the first split and then 18 games in the second. And I said, we're open to tweaking. Like, what are you guys thinking about? And we, when we look at competitive formats, we go goal-based, right? So there's a lot of things you can do with competitive formats, but we really aligned on wanting to send our best 3 teams to Worlds. And then after that, we didn't want to lose championship moments, right? We still wanted teams on stages, whether they were literal stages or kind of proverbial stages, being able to lift a trophy. And teams asked for flexibility. They wanted the ability to try players out. How can you expect us to develop talent when I only play 18 games, and losing a game could cost me a bye in the playoffs.
Yep.
So we all sat down, we crunched those out. We have one of our teams, Golden Guardians, which you mentioned earlier, is owned by the Warriors. Their head of esports is a former Riot League operations guy. They have a couple of folks working for him who are also really great with competitive formats. So they led a discussion around some changes that they proposed from the team side. One of them was the preseason tournament, a 3-week tournament. That, we kind of left the format open for the Riot folks to dive in. We made a bunch of modifications, but the goal was for teams to have, we have a lot of imports in NA. So we wanted to leave some time for those guys to get into the country and get into shape. We wanted something that would help showcase new team rosters and build some excitement. So, by all of our measures, lock-in was a success. We're going to look to definitely do it again next year, potentially expand it. We're talking about that now. And then the thing that came out of our discussion with teams was, let's have more games. So I'm always going to have a minority of owners in the room who raise a hand and say, can we please go back to best of 3? Which I'm, I've told them that, that's the hill I die on. Big proponent of best of 1s. We were able to mix in some best of 3s, some best of 5s into the lock-in tournament to get some series exposure. But we added an additional round robin in summer. So that's another 18 games that every team will play. We're still going to get our full spring split in. So teams will play 18 games there. So over the course of the season, teams will get 54 games in during the regular seasons. And we combine the spring and summer records. So now for everyone who ever worried that the first split just didn't matter to get to Worlds, we've combined them and made them matter. So teams now, teams have 54 games to play with. If you want to try out a new mid laner for 2 or 3 games, right, there's no huge harm in doing that at this point. So reception was really good from fans, but we kick off. We're recording this on the 4th, so we kick off in just another day for our real regular season. So excited to see how that rolls out.
Yeah, I mean, it does. And it's sort of back to our point of, before around trying to have some more similarities with traditional sport. Like one of the things, the 2 splits thing is something that traditional sports people can't get their head around. We have 2 splits and this one gets you qualified to the mid-season invitational, which is a great opportunity. And then this one is Worlds. But really from a team point of view, Worlds is it's the Summoners Cup is the thing you want to chase. And so I think, connecting both and having the extended season and having the results early and results late all matter. And also having extra games, because it takes away that NFL factor of every game is so important. It does give a bit more flexibility in the format. So, and for those who don't know, when we're talking, we're getting a bit esports heavy and using terms. When we're saying be a best of 1 and best of 3, esports does have a history in having a best of 3 format in these matchups. But they're normally, in this case, what you're talking about, they're reserved for finals, to have those series. And so the best of 1 allows you to consume it in the same way that you're watching best of 1s in the NBA, in the MLB, NFL on a weekly basis. So that's the difference. So then you did talk about the development piece. How important is that for North America and as the commissioner to make sure more players are coming through and that groundswell of North American players or players coming through the scene that lift the LCS overall? How important is that as part of your remit?
Yeah, it's hugely important. And I think it's certainly risen in priority rank over the last few years. When we franchised the league, so starting in 2018, and we closed off promotion and relegation, we essentially eliminated the amateur scene in North America because we created this super interesting ecosystem where if you were an amateur team, you had infrastructure because there was a monetary value on winning an open qualifier and getting into the Challenger Series, which was our B League. And those slots had a value, right? So you could play in, sell your slot to someone else, and then just go do it again, right? And it was like a really steady income stream if you could pull it off. The bigger prize was getting into the LCS because during promotion relegation, the reported values that they were selling for before I got to Riot were like $1 million per slot. So that created a natural incentive system where people, I mean, they were still taking big gambles, right? If you were running a 100,000 US in expenses to try to get into the Challenger Series to sell that slot for $250,000, there's certainly a risk that you're not able to do that. But it created a really robust amateur system because there were stakes there. When we removed promotion and relegation, all those stakes went away, and a lot of folks who had been kind of playing the market just walked away. And that wasn't necessarily the worst thing, right? Their objectives weren't aligned with developing talent. It was about amassing a team that can simply beat a team from the tier above you. And those are, while they sound like they're the same, they're not, right? They're fundamentally different. So we had hoped that our Academy League, which is our current B League, every LCS team is required to run a team in the Academy League. Our thought was that would be our developmental league, right? It's where teams would take risks, where they would try out new folks. What it's really become is an extended bench. So if you're taking a flyer on somebody on your main roster, you'll pick up a veteran and stick them on your academy team just in case you need them in the middle of the season, and then don't want to have to go out into the market and try to buy a contract at some inflated price because the market knows there's a need. But that obviously defeats our developmental purposes. And we've seen some great talent come up through the current system, some of which have played at Worlds and performed well in international play. But those numbers are few and far between. And we've had a rough showing at Worlds for the last 2 years out of North America. We haven't, when you think about it in terms of like a World Cup format for people that aren't familiar with our Worlds format, we haven't gotten into the bracket stage from North America in the last 2 years. So there's a lot of focus now on how we fix that. And there are some folks who would raise a hand and say, well, let's import more players, right? Let's go buy the best players from Europe or Korea or China and bring them over and put them, try to build some pieces around them. But the, certainly prevailing thought on my team is let's fix the developmental pipeline so that we're, grooming more talent in our own region who can go out and win. So we've made major changes to our academy and amateur structure this year. We cut down the academy season in half and gave those guys the other half of the time to go play in amateur tournaments. So now if you're an amateur tournament or an amateur team owner, you have an opportunity to play, the Cloud9 Academy team or the Team Liquid Academy team. And it's like not only a great test for your players, but, there's good brand rub there for folks. We have tournament organizers who are like, wait a minute, I can get, kind of a premier LCS brand into my tournament for their academy team. Like, yes, I'm all in. Let's throw big amateur tournaments. And it's starting to create this groundswell where we definitely have seen a lot more interest from amateur players coming in and going pro and being able to take advantage of those opportunities. People who say, oh, now I understand the path to take to be a pro player. So there's been a lot of spotlight on that. We're really optimistic about how that's going to pay dividends for us in the future.
Yeah, and it's again a real important point to give that pathway to know how a player can get there. And again, that's something that, like you said, is being reshaped, but also being developed across these sports. When in the traditional sports, like that's where we all started. We all started at Pee-wee football or minor league, playing baseball as a junior and working our way up, and they've got a well-established pathway of getting there. And I think that's an exciting piece for esports because, people are playing League of Legends. It's like, well, how do I do it? I start playing in my university and there's a university league, or then I start playing in amateur and finding a pathway. Speaking of pathways, it's sort of a nice segue. It sort of leads into the conversations we've had over the last couple of months. We're recording this. The new league, the LCO's just launched and will be launching soon, coming out of the ashes of the OPL. Our conversations have been around the O scene, and as an owner, we don't have my Gravitas hat on. I'm wearing the jersey. Really excited about the scene going forward and the like coming out of the foundation of what the OPL was. There's now stronger ties between OS and NA, both from a player point of view. You were talking there about players being in the academy system or in the LCS. We've seen a bunch of OS players, Rays, Destiny, former OPL players that are now in the in the LCS, FBI and the like, and then also players going into the to the academy system. Harry is now at Team Liquid, a former Gravitas player. Like, what are some of the options and pathways for like OS players and the connection between OS and NA?
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece is that when the OPL was spun down, the kind of initial plan to make sure that professional players or aspiring professional players in OS had a path was to make them residents of the North American region. So, we have an import policy where you have to have three domestic players, 3 resident players. So for North America, that's Canada and the U.S. Mexican players play through our Latin American league. So now OS players also count as one of those domestic players. So I think that's a great route now for players from Oceania to get picked up by academy and LCS teams. And I know there were certainly, once we made that decision, a number of teams who reached out into the region looking for talent. And we have a number of former OS coaches and personalities as well in the scene who probably were a big advantage in scouting. I think there's a lot of great future opportunities. I think we run a product called Scouting Grounds, an event called Scouting Grounds every year in November. And Scouting Grounds is like the NFL Combine. It's the best example I have. We take, the way it started back in 2016, I believe, was we took 20 players from the League of Legends solo queue in North America, the top 4 at each position. We brought them in. We gave them analysts and coaches from the LCS to help them improve. We did a draft and put them on teams, and then had them do a bunch of team play, and then highlighted them on the LCS stage on the last day of competition, handed out some awards. And we've done variations of that every year. We've done a draft a couple of years where LCS teams are able to draft one of the players, and they have the right to negotiate with them for a couple of weeks. It's not quite as expansive in terms of rights as you'd see from the NBA or NFL draft, just because of US law. But that's provided a great path for players in the past. In 2019, we spent 2 years working with Faceit, and Faceit put on the Faceit Scouting Ground circuit, where it was an alternate means to qualify into Scouting Grounds. You could do it as a team. So in those 2 years, we took 10 players from the Scouting Ground circuit and then 10 players from solo queue. We're working on the model for this year, but we certainly budgeted for the possibility that we're flying players over from OS, and it's a great opportunity to get some players from OS involved in Scouting Grounds, and COVID permitting, fly them out to LA and give them the same experience. One of the crazy ideas we have for our kickoff tournament for next year is, what if we had some teams from OSCOM, or we invited some teams from LATAM or Brazil, people may be able to make that journey and get back in time so as not to disrupt the start of their own season. That stuff's all super early. We could just as easily wind up having 10 LCS teams in it again next year, but we're working through those opportunities as well. And then, I think with so many folks from OS currently in NA, there's a lot of great ties that I think naturally exist now. And I expect that as the LCO gets spun up, there'll definitely be some conversations between team owners like yourselves and team owners in the LCS who are looking to create some pipelines to hopefully get some talent into North America.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a focus of, mine from a development point of view. I've been using multiple OPL players, Harry as an example, Ayla, Isles, who, they stopped for coffee in the OPL for 2 years, but they were grinding, proved their performance and been identified. And so there'll be a combination of eyes on those OS guys playing, the ones in the LCS that are proving themselves, FBI and the like, the guys in the academy. And it's like, well, hang on, these players keep coming out of OS. We're quite proud of our performances across sport. Like we perform for our population. So yeah, I'm excited. won't say who, but I am talking to a few teams about developing those pathways, because whether it's just getting exposure to some of the coaching systems and what they're doing, and I think as that coaching and pathway development system happens, that it does make it that easier. So, that's where I think it's an exciting time for like the next generation. After we've seen a bunch of players leave in the past 2 years, it's like, well, what's the next generation going to look like? What are the opportunities going to look like? And, from a team's point of view with LCL, we're really excited about the season ahead. So, and if you're in NA, please come and watch the LCO, because we could have your next mid laner, your next jungler. If you want to be the one that get in early on your fantasy picks, and be watching the LCO. What are your hopes and goals for 2021? Which is it's a loaded question when you've got things like COVID and the like over the top. But what are you looking to get out of 2021 for the LCS?
Yeah, I think we launched our rebrand into COVID, so we're spending a lot of time focusing on the voice that we use for broadcast and our content. We changed up our broadcast personalities this year, which I think has been really great, kind of invigorating for everybody. We still have plans around spring and summer finals, not ready to say what those are yet, but we're trying to move towards something rather than having teams playing in their team facilities and kind of catching reactions on fan cams. We're trying to build something bigger and better, but COVID is certainly not helping that as we move forward.
When you say you're looking at the voice and stuff, what is that voice, and what are you aiming for in 2021 around the rebrand?
Yeah, we have for a lot of years, right? The NALCS, which is now the LCS, was really Riot's first foray into having a Riot-run regular league for League of Legends. Before that, it had been third party and community based. We really wanted, we believe we were a sport. We have athletes that play, and we really wanted to be seen as a sport. We hired a bunch of broadcast folks from conventional sport, who came over from places like the NFL Network or Fox Sports, and they began to build out a conventional sport broadcast. Right, we talk about the NBA on TNT with Charles Barkley as the kind of the model that we were hitting. And we pointed to that when people would ask, is this really a sport? In addition to all of our statistics and the arenas we sold out, we'd say, look, it looks just like a sport when you watch the broadcast. The only thing that's different is when you cut to the action, it's on Summoner's Rift and not on the hardwood. But we've outgrown that. We've outgrown that need for validation. Like we're validated at this point. So we have a digital sport. We have a younger audience. Our audience isn't really consuming sport in the same way that I did when I was growing up. So we're looking to kind of carve out that middle ground, right? Where we still feel like a premier competitive property, but we're a little bit more casual and a little bit more in the conversation with fans. Like our tagline this season is "Made by Many," and that for us really celebrates the fact that the LCS is where it is, 9 years after we started, because of everyone who came along before us, including the fans, and helped us grow to where we are now. So there's a long way between kind of our final form and where we are now, but we're working to create content, put it out, see what fans like and what they react to, and then kind of iterate as we move forward.
But it's a bit more being comfortable in your skin, like you're sort of saying before, it's like, well, it's like Monday Night Football, so we've got to put on the suit and the tie and look like Joe Buck or Ernie on TNT and do that. But whereas like, well, hang on, our fans are doing sea shanties and talking about the game. We should be more, like them and doing that content and talking to them in that manner. So it's that shift is already starting to come through. I'm going to finish up, and it's fine because every podcast we get interrupted by people coming on the podcast and saying hello, and it's okay because in 2020 and 2021, children interrupting podcasts is an allowed thing, Chris. So if you want to unmute and your child is asking about coming to bed, this is me filling everybody, and I don't want James to take this out. Chris, I want to finish this off if your kids are now going to bed, which is fine. I want to finish off with the Sports Geek closing five. So people know, Chris Greeley here, the commissioner of the LCS. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Yeah, it was a Yankee game. So I grew up in northern New Jersey, about half-hour drive from Yankee Stadium. Big baseball fan growing up. My grandfather, who was a Mets fan, crosstown rival, took me to my first Yankee game when I was, had to be 7 or 8 years old. And I still remember Gary Ward in the outfield for the Yankees, and they were awful back then, sometime in the kind of late 80s. So that's my first sporting event. Fell in love with baseball.
And so then the second thing, because you did mention it before, around esports events, and I always point to people who don't understand esports events to the 7 Days Out documentary that profiles the LCS. It's an absolute cracker and helps you understand the event. Do you remember your first esports event?
Yeah, it was. My very first esports event was Worlds 2016 semifinals at Madison Square Garden. It was a match between SKT and Rocks Tigers. It's one of the most fabled matches in League of Legends Worlds history. And I was, it's the first live event I had ever been to. So the LCS broadcasts out of LA. I lived in New York. I wasn't making a lot of cross country flights those days to watch esports. That was my very first, and it was. I had accepted the job at Riot. I hadn't yet started. I was still doing my lawyer thing, kind of packing up the house and getting ready to move across the country. So it was the kind of thing that was really validating for the career choice I was making when, the Madison Square Garden shook and, fans were going out of their minds. And I realized, this is definitely made the right decision here.
Yeah, definitely. You would have been to a few sports events and esports events in your time. Do you have a go-to food at a sports event, or is there a specific food that only happens at esports events that people should know about? Or
no, I'm super basic in my sports food. I'm a hot dog and beer kind of guy. There's when you're going to sit in a fold up seat with people on either elbow. You can only get so fancy with the food you're eating.
No, exactly. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Depends on the day. Sometimes it's Reddit, sometimes it's Twitter, sometimes it's the New York Times. Just depends on the morning.
Okay. Is there someone that you follow? It might be a colleague or someone that you read or someone you follow on Twitter that the podcast listeners should follow?
I follow a lot of political people, and I tend not to try to mix my work with my political views. In terms of esports, I follow teams. That's where I get my best content from. So, any of the LCS or LCO teams, I think would be great to follow. So, you know what? I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say Gravitas. Gravitas is the team you should be following if I had to pick one.
There you go. This has not been a paid endorsement. This everyone know. Like this hits Reddit. It's like it's a really long con to get Chris Greeley to endorse Gravitas. Lastly, and I'll get you. I normally get people to answer this personally, but then also as the league commissioner. What social media platform is your MVP? What's the best platform for both you and the LCS?
I think Twitter is probably the answer for both of them. I think it's where like the esports space, at least in North America, is pretty heavily concentrated on Twitter, and it tends to be a little bit more free flowing than Reddit, which is probably my number 2. I think Instagram has because it's so photo based, has the ability to kind of convey the most emotion and the less kind of off the cuff toxic thought. But I'm a sucker for off the cuff toxic thoughts. So Twitter is my platform.
That should be the byline for Twitter.
Yeah.
Really. I don't know if Jack wants it that. It's like, come to Twitter. Off the cuff toxic talk is what we're doing. So I don't think you're going to get picked up as a brand manager for Twitter, but I think it is quite on there. How can people who want to connect and see what you're doing, where can they connect with you on the internet, and where can they follow the LCS?
Yeah, so I would suggest Twitter for both. I'm at I am Grizza, GRZA, which is a very old gamer handle that I've been using probably since college. The LCS, I think, is at LCS Official. Something, yes, at LCS Official, something I should know much faster than I do.
Across all the platforms, but if you look up LCS and LOL Esports, and it's on all of your gaming and channels across Twitch and YouTube and the like. Chris Greeley, best of luck for the season ahead. For the LCS kicking off. Hopefully we cross paths at an esports event soon if COVID does allow. Hopefully I'm doing that cheering on Gravitas in the near future. But all the best for the season ahead, and look forward to, like I said, catching up next time we're in the same part of the world.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you so much for having me. I've listened to a bunch of episodes, so was honored for the invitation. Good luck with the launch of the LCO and with Gravitas this season.
Find out more about Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process at digitaltodollars.com. We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon.
Thanks again to Chris Greeley. You can send him a tweet. I am Grizzer. IAMGRZ, or Z from our American friends, A. And follow the LCS. If you look up LCS, you will find it on every social and digital channel. LCS on Twitch and YouTube. LCS Official on Twitter. So check that out. There is some great Oceanic talent playing in the LCS and in the LCS in the academy system. So it's great to see Oceanic players finding their way on the world stage, which is a great segue to talking about Gravitas. And as Chris said, please follow Gravitas. You can do that at Gravitas on Twitter, Gravitas GG, Gravitas OS on other platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitch, which allows me to sort of talk about what we're trying to do in 2021 and our goals at Gravitas and in the formation of the new LCO is to help see more Oceanic players on the world esports stage. Hopefully, they're doing that, wearing a Gravitas jersey and on stages like they were and we discussed in Shanghai or potentially in North America or Europe. How are we going to go about doing that? We're going to really focus on development of players in the Oceanic scene and having a real doubling down on that squad mentality. So we're looking to have a wide squad and continue to develop them, and it's going to really come down to how our coaching team operates and really focusing on the development of the players, because I think there's a real opportunity. And the pitch that I've made to players when signing them was there's been a lot of successful OPL players that have stopped in the OPL and played really hard, shown what they can do over a 2-year period. The examples, Harry Kang, who played with Gravitas in our inaugural year in 2019, Isles, Ayla, they all played 2 years in the OPL, and now they're in the North American academy system. So I think there is real opportunity for Oceanic players. So we've set up a coaching team of 3 with a focus on the meta. The meta is the style of game and the tactics and everything around the game. As Chris said in the interview, League of Legends is a lot like 4D chess, so there's a lot of strategy involved. And then also development, so developing both the players and the team. And then analysis, so looking in and diving into the stats in the same way that we're seeing in traditional sports. Moneyball, if you've watched the movie Brad Pitt, you know that went really well in the world of baseball, and obviously is also translated into multiple sports, diving in on the analysis of the stats and looking for advantages. So they're the 3 focuses and pillars of what we're looking from a coaching team. Really happy to have 3 up-and-coming coaches that are really hungry to follow that dream. Cadence, Hugo Kang, Poltron, Kim Nichols, Velixis, Joseph, Celios, and I'm hoping I'm saying your name, Joseph. My apologies if I'm not. They're going to be our coaching team and really look to develop our squad. A thank you to Calvin, Omo, who have coached Gravitas in the past and been a big contributor to the team previously, and also a thank you to Seal, who also assisted in helping us find the talent and coaching people and giving us advice on the region. So that's our coaching team, and the way we went about putting together the squad, we really had a strong focus on grassroots, and we were only able to do that with our partnership with Weekend Warriors. They did an absolutely amazing job with the Gravitas trials. We had four broadcast days, 2 Twitch channels, 16 games, where we gave a lot of players. And again, thank you very much to all the players that contributed. But a big shout out and a big thanks to Can. Blake Scan, who is an amazing partner with Weekend Warriors, did an amazing job. The Weekend Warriors team was amazing in getting a broadcast crew on stream, and thanks to all the broadcasters and the streamers that were part of it, and also the coaches and players that were part of the trials. It was really successful. It was a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to working with Blake and Ash at the Weekend Warriors, that can help us further develop stars for OS and potentially stars for Gravitas. So our roster, our goal is a 10-man roster with a really strong emphasis on development. One of the stories and one of the sports stories that I use when talking to the players was the story of Australian Socceroos goalkeeper Matt Ryan, who was recently loaned to Arsenal. And then as a Gunners man myself, I watched it with interest, but what I was really pleased with was Matt Ryan's response when they said, hey, what's it going to be like coming in as the backup keeper? And his response was one of this squad mentality that we're trying to have at Gravitas. He said, well, I'm going to be trying my hardest, and I really do hope that I am on, get a first team appearance with Arsenal. But if I don't, the guy in front of me will be absolutely playing out of his skin. So that pushing one another and pushing each other is something that we're going to really be pushing over the next couple of years at Gravitas with that goal of we want to see more Gravitas players on the international stage, and we want teammates to be cheering that on. So our roster, going from top to bottom, top laner, we've got nobody. Lachlan Keane O'Keefe. Lockie comes back. Nobody comes back. Was on the squad last year. Really pleased to have Lockie back. Our other top is Safed Mahmood Safar. Really pleased. Super excited how passionate and excited Safar is to play in the LCO. Jungle, we've got a Zeus, Blake, Slage. Again, I should be getting players' names right, and they get to call me Sian if I've got their names right. But really looking forward to seeing what Azus can do in the jungle. Recently moved into that position and has a lot of upside. I'm really looking forward to seeing Azus play. In the mid, we've got Kyosei, Nathan Bacha, or Baka. Again, I really should be checking everyone's names, but really looking forward to seeing Kyosei play. Showed a lot of promise and skills in the Gravitas trials, so really looking forward to it. Our ADC is Piglet, Ruben Salb. Really looking forward to seeing Ruben perform really well in the ADC role. So he is our ADC, our marksman, and then our support is Isaiah, Jaden Dow. Is our support. So thanks to all the players that play for Gravitas in 2020. A special shout out, as I said earlier, to Harry Kang, or Harry as he is known. He played with us in 2019, and now he's in the Team Liquid Academy. So really pleased. He's one of the Gravitas players, one of the Gravitas alumni that is now international. And we want to see more people join Harry overseas. And also, congrats to all the players that played in the Gravitas trials. It's great to see so many players that were involved in the trials being announced on LCO teams as the rosters are getting announced. So that was the exact objective of the trials, to find talent for the Gravitas squad and also more talent for the LCO. I think as the LCO gets more talent in, we will again be a force and hopefully have some great performances on the world stage, like we saw Legacy beating a European team in the play-ins just a few months ago. So that's it. That's for all things Gravitas. I'd love for you to stay in touch, and I want Gravitas to be your esports team. So if someone says, do you follow esports? You can say, sort of, yes I do, but I do follow Gravitas. You can go to gravitasg.gg. For those of you who don't know, the .gg is for good game. That's what you say at the end of a game in chat. So go to gravitas.gg, sign up for the newsletter so you know what's happening when the games are going to start. They will be on Twitch. They will be on YouTube. I will be sharing them on my socials. But yeah, please follow our socials and also follow our newly minted roster. Back back to all things Sports Geek. As always, if you want to reach out and have a chat about what you're doing in the digital space, please reach out. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call, or you can just go to sportsgeekhq.com. There's some really big buttons there that make it really easy to get in touch. You can get in touch with me, contact me. As I said, I love working with podcast listeners. We have got the Sports Geek Amplify series coming very soon, where we're going to be profiling some terrific sports technology companies that are going to solve some big problems that are currently in the world of sport. So I'm really looking forward to that series. It is on its way. And don't forget, Sports Biz Zoom calls are back the second Wednesday of every month, or the second Tuesday if you're in North America. You can sign up for the next one by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Zoom calls. Really enjoyed the conversation that we had on the last Zoom call, the first one for 2021. We started talking about digital collectibles. That is available for all Patreon subscribers who can watch the replay. Don't forget, you can go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. That's it for this episode. Thank you again to my guest on this episode, Chris Greeley. Please check out the LCS. It is some entertaining League of Legends esports, and it is entertaining once you start understanding the game just a little. You don't have to understand it and master it. Just listen to the casters. They get excited, and you'll start knowing when you're meant to get excited. And also, please follow and check out the LCO. I would love your support of Gravitas. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.